All right, election of 1796. Now you got to remember that these elections aren't like they are today, so you need to kind of pay attention, okay? So, like elections today, both parties pick their candidates. And I'll start with the Federalists, who they nominate. Okay, the Federalists nominated John Adams for president and Thomas Pinckney for vice president. That's who the Federalists nominated in the election of 1796. John Adams for president and Thomas Pinckney for vice president. Two familiar names. John Adams for president, Thomas Pinckney for vice president. The Republican Party countered. Who do you think they nominated for president? Republicans. Thomas Jefferson for president and a fellow by the name of Aaron Burr for vice president, who's on your ID sheet. So the Federalists nominate John Adams for president and Thomas Pinckney for vice president, and the Republicans counter with Thomas Jefferson for president and Aaron Burr for vice president. Now, in this election, it wasn't like it is now. The top vote getter is going to be president, and the second most votes is going to be vice president. It didn't go on party lines at the time. Now, it was kind of expected that voters would, vote for either the Federalist Party or the Republican Party, and if that was the case, if people voted for John Adams and Thomas Pinckney consistently within the party, that they would be the ones nominated. Well, that isn't what happened, okay? When the election ballots were counted, John Adams, the Federalist candidate, had the most votes, so he's going to be elected the nation's second president. However, Thomas Jefferson, who was the Republican candidate, received the second highest vote, more than Pinckney, and so he became the vice president of the United States. So you have a president and a vice president from opposing parties. Can you imagine that today? Okay? So that's what happened. And so after this election, it kind of became an unwritten law that voters were expected to vote for only one party during the election. But prior to this, they did not. And as a result, we have a Federalist president and a Republican vice president. See how that works for us. Well, President Adams really didn't have a whole lot of time to worry about his problem, because our next subtopic, on the verge of war with France, occurs. Okay? So we're moving to the next subtopic, which is on the verge of war with France. And like I mentioned, Adams wasn't very pleased, obviously, to have a Republican vice president, but he didn't have much time to worry about it, because by the time Adams took the oath of office as president, we were being threatened with a war from France. Now, why do you think they were still pissed at us? What didn't we do that still chaps them? What didn't we do? Well, because we violated what? The Treaty of 1778. So they were still a little bit chapped over the fact that we did not aid France during their conflict with Great Britain because of our agreement, our permanent alliance, called the Treaty of 1778. Now, they also resented what other treaty? Because they saw it as pro-British. Jay's Treaty. So they're just brewing for a fight, okay? They're still upset because we didn't support France as a result of our permanent alliance that we signed with the Treaty of 1778, because we were trying to stay neutral. They were still offended by that. And they also saw Jay's Treaty as pro-British, was it? Absolutely. I mean, completely pro-British. There were people in the United States that didn't like it. Thought we were being, kind of soft. So they resented the fact that we didn't abide by the Treaty of 1778, and they also resented Jay's Treaty, which they viewed as pro-British. Now you think about it a little bit. Would you be a little frustrated if you were French? Not only did we not abide by our treaty, not only did we not really help the French when we signed Jay's treaty, when we were fighting the Revolutionary War, who came to our aid? Did Britain? No, France did. So they just are not happy with the United States. Geez, you continue to just dump on us. You don't live up to a treaty you agreed to. You sign a treaty with our enemy that's very pro-British. And we're the ones that came and supported you during the Revolutionary War, not the British. So it's going to be President Adams to try to negotiate peace with the country of France, because we still cannot afford to get ourselves in a major war. So as Washington avoided war with Great Britain and France, it'll be Adams that'll try to avoid war with France. Okay? That'll take us to our next subtopic, which is the XYZ affair. I think you could see something like this on your AP exam possibly, so we'll see. The XYZ affair. Because he wanted peace, early in 1797, President Adams sent 3 prominent American diplomats to France to try to reach an agreement with that country to avoid war, something we had done twice before. Only we did it once with Britain, and Spain really did it with us when we went there, remember? But we've done it twice. So early in 1797, President Adams sends 3 prominent American diplomats over to France to try to reach an agreement with that country to avoid war again. Now, when these American diplomats arrived in France, they were met privately by 3 French diplomats. Makes sense, doesn't it? Our 3 American diplomats are going to sit down privately with 3 French diplomats. Well, we introduced ourselves as I'm so-and-so, I'm so-and-so, and I'm so-and-so, and these French diplomats would only identify themselves as X, Y, and Z. They would not give any other identification than that. So I think our diplomats knew something might be up. So these French diplomats would only identify themselves as X, Y, and Z. Now, when you negotiate, what does negotiation mean? Well, if you do this, we'll do that. If you do this, we'll do that. These guys, this XYZ, these 3 guys weren't into negotiating. They gave us 3, what? If you're not negotiating, you're demanding. They're called what? U word. Ultimatums. Okay? So, these 3 French diplomats, X, Y, and Z, sat down with the 3 American representatives and basically just gave them 3 ultimatums. And ultimatums, when you don't, it's not negotiating, you do this or else. That's what an ultimatum is. Here are the 3 ultimatums that the French diplomats gave the American representatives. Number 1, the United States must publicly apologize for some negative remarks that President Adams made about France in a speech that he gave to Congress. Somehow the word got over to France that President Adams had made some negative remarks about the French in a speech he gave to Congress. The first ultimatum was that President Adams was to state publicly that he apologized for those negative remarks he made against France in his speech to Congress. So the United States must publicly apologize for negative remarks made by President Adams against France that came from a speech that the President gave to Congress. Seems a little, what do you call it? Seems a little, right? Yeah. Second ultimatum is the United States had to, in other words, would be forced to give a loan to France. Didn't ask us if they could borrow money, said you will lend us money. So they want a public apology from the President of the United States for remarks he supposedly or did make negative to France in a speech to Congress, and they demand that the United States give them a loan. They even went as far as to say that the United States is going to pay us a bribe of $250,000. What would be the bribe for? Not to go to war. So you're going to pay us $250,000 not to go to war. I mean, that was pretty stiff ultimatums. The first one was a little petty, you know, apologizing publicly for negative remarks made by President Adams in a speech that he gave to Congress. The second ultimatum, oh, you gotta be kidding. Hold that thought.
Heart race.
You know what drives me nuts? When you